Hello everyone, welcome to my update US gossip channel. Kody Brown had always projected confidence, swaggering, loud, determined, and convinced he could outlast any storm, but nothing could have prepared him for the moment everything finally came crashing down, leaving him standing alone in the Arizona wind with nothing but a stack of overdue notices, a drained bank account, and a future he no longer controlled as the long-rumored bankruptcy bombshell detonated at the center of his already fractured world, forcing a desperate father, a wounded ex-husband, and a man stripped of his illusions to do the unthinkable, reach out to Christine and David Woolley for help, pleading with the very people he once blamed for his unraveling. The truth was brutal. Over the last few years, Kody had burned through resources with the same intensity he burned through relationships, believing new business schemes, property dreams, and confidence-fueled decisions would magically fix the chaos that had begun the moment Christine packed her things, closed the chapter on plural marriage, and walked into the next phase of her life without him. His downfall was slow at first. The KODY'S payments became harder to manage after Janelle and Mary distanced themselves financially, the family's TLC income was no longer divided the way it once was, and legal fees tied to dissolving spiritual unions, managing property disputes, and navigating years' worth of entanglements drained what he still had set aside. The tipping point came when lenders began circling, debts matured, and new interest penalties hit with the force of a tidal wave, leaving Kody sitting at a kitchen table that suddenly felt too big, too empty, and too symbolic of the family he'd once commanded with pride. Even Robin, whose anxiety over finances had reached a fever pitch, couldn't shield him from the truth. They were on the edge of losing everything. Their Flagstaff home felt more like a financial noose than a sanctuary, and the stress lines carved into Kody's face deepened each time another envelope arrived stamped with the word urgent in red ink. He knew bankruptcy was no longer a distant rumor whispered by critics online. It was a real possibility, looming like a shadow that followed him from room to room, refusing to let him breathe. In a moment of frustrated clarity, he realized the only people who could possibly help him navigate the KODY'S aftermath, the only people who knew the land, the agreements, and the financial history as intimately as he did, were Christine and David Woolley, the couple who were thriving in ways Kody once thought impossible. Christine, with her glowing confidence and steady new life, had moved so far beyond their old world that Kody sometimes struggled to believe she had once relied on him emotionally and financially. Now she was traveling, building businesses, laughing effortlessly, and sharing a marriage with a man who actually prioritized her. David, calm and grounded, had become the stabilizing presence Kody never understood she needed, someone who didn't operate out of ego, competition, or fear of losing control. Reaching out to them felt humiliating, yet Kody convinced himself it was strategic. They knew the past, they understood the contracts around the land, and maybe, just maybe, they'd want to help ensure the legacy of KODY'S didn't rot in court battles or foreclosure auctions. But when Kody finally drafted the message, his hands trembled in a way they never had during decades of managing a family of nearly 24. He typed slowly, each word feeling heavier than the last. I need your help. Things have gotten bad here. I know we have our history, but I'm asking as someone who's trying to protect what we built. Can we talk? Christine's phone buzzed as she and David sat in their cozy Utah living room, planning their next weekend getaway and reviewing photos for Christine's thriving social media platforms. When she read the message, her breath caught, not out of fear, but out of disbelief. The man who once criticized her for being disobedient, the man who dismissed her pain, who downplayed her loneliness, who insisted she was the problem in the marriage, was now asking her for help. David sensed the shift instantly, leaning closer as Christine showed him the message. He read it silently, eyes narrowing, not with anger, but with something resembling pity mixed with caution. He's drowning, David said, his tone calm but firm. And he's reaching for the people he thinks still owe him something. Christine sat back, absorbing the reality of the moment. Part of her felt vindicated, karma had finally come full circle, but another part of her felt a strange heaviness. She had moved on beautifully, but the wounds Kody left behind hadn't disappeared, they had simply scarred over. Helping him now wasn't just a financial or logistical decision, it was emotional, psychological, and deeply personal. But Christine was also someone who believed in closure, in growth, and in doing what was right, even when it was uncomfortable. She looked at David, who squeezed her hand and nodded, silently telling her he would support whatever choice she made. After a long pause, she typed a response, "We can talk. But this isn't about fixing the past. It's about clarity." Days later, the conversation unfolded at a small Flagstaff cafe, awkward and tense at first. Kody sat opposite Christine and David, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. His confident posture was gone, replaced by exhaustion and a humility that bordered on desperation. He explained the debts, the miscalculations, the fallout from years of instability. He admitted he had mismanaged things, not out of malice, but out of pride and panic. He confessed that he hadn't expected the family fractures to hit him financially as hard as they had emotionally. Christine listened without interrupting, her face composed, her heart steady. David asked thoughtful, practical questions, about the land, the loans, the obligations, the tax implications. He treated the situation not as gossip, not as ammunition, but as a solvable problem tied to a man who had finally hit bottom. By the end of the meeting, a plan had emerged, not one that involved financial bailouts or emotional entanglements, but one that outlined steps toward legal clarity. Christine and David agreed to help Kody understand the original contracts, ensure the division of assets was clean, and guide him toward the right professionals who could manage the bankruptcy process if it became necessary. They were not saving him, they were helping him save himself. As they stood to leave, Christine offered a gentle but firm truth: hitting rock bottom isn't the end, Kody. It's where you finally see what actually matters. Watching them walk away, Christine radiant and self-assured, David protective yet warm, Kody felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. It wasn't resentment. It wasn't jealousy. It was gratitude mixed with regret, the realization that the life he'd taken for granted had transformed into something he could no longer access but could finally appreciate from afar. For the first time in years, he understood that the crisis he feared most had delivered the clarity he needed. Bankruptcy wasn't the real shock, it was discovering that the people he once underestimated were the ones who showed him the most grace when his world finally collapsed. But the story didn't end with that bittersweet moment outside the cafe, because the shockwaves of Kody's crisis rippled far beyond that quiet Flagstaff meeting, reaching the rest of the family and stirring emotions that had been buried, ignored, or suppressed for years. When word began circulating, first through whispers from Robin, then through siblings who remained in sporadic contact, that Kody was facing possible bankruptcy, the reactions varied wildly. Janelle, practical and level-headed even amid heartbreak, felt a mixture of sadness and frustration. She had warned Kody repeatedly for years about overspending, about the dangers of taking on too much debt, about the false confidence he placed in future TLC seasons and speculative KODY Pass dreams. Now, hearing that he had turned to Christine and David for guidance but had never reached out to her first, she felt a sting of betrayal, not because she wanted to help him financially, but because she had once been the one he trusted with logistical decisions, budgets, long-term planning, and the quiet sacrifices that had kept the Brown family functional during their Las Vegas years. Sitting in her North Carolina rental, unpacking boxes from her latest move, she shook her head and whispered, "He still doesn't see me." Meanwhile, Mary, who had recently built her own life of independence and self-worth, reacted with a bracing mixture of karma and compassion. She didn't wish ruin on anyone, not even the man who had dismissed her, replaced her, and treated her like a footnote in her own marriage, but she couldn't ignore the poetic justice of it all. For decades, Kody had preached unity but practiced favoritism. Now, unity was something he needed but couldn't find. In her quiet Utah B&B, Mary reflected on how far she had come. "I saved myself before any of this touched me," she murmured, a twinge of relief mixed with lingering disappointment. "He never understood the weight he put on us." But the most intense reaction came from Robin. Watching Kody spiral into financial chaos tore open every fear she had tried to smother since the day she joined the family. She had always wanted stability, structure, emotional safety, a sense of unity, but instead, she had inherited the fallout of wives leaving, kids blaming Kody, and now a looming financial disaster that threatened the home she once believed was her forever place. To her, bankruptcy wasn't just a legal process, It was a symbol of collapse, evidence that the family she had sacrificed everything for was gone, shattered beyond repair. Worse, the idea of Kody turning to Christine, who Robin believed had abandoned the family and encouraged others to follow, made her feel replaced, unsupported, and painfully insecure. "She left you, Kody," Robin cried one night, pacing their living room while Kody sat with his head in his hands. "She walked away. And now you're asking her for help? What does that make me?" Kody didn't answer. He couldn't. Because deep down, he knew Robin wasn't angry at Christine, she was terrified. Terrified that everything she built with Kody was built on sand, and the tide was finally coming in. The tension between them grew heavier, thicker, almost suffocating. For years, Robin had been the favored wife, the emotional partner, the one he confided in. But now, she wasn't the one he could lean on, at least not financially, not with the kind of clarity this crisis demanded. She wanted to help, but she didn't understand the business basics, the land contracts, the long-term structure of plural family finances the way Christine and Janelle once had. Kody felt the shift too, realizing that the partner he had clung to for comfort wasn't the partner equipped to help him dig out of the crater he had created. But the biggest ripple effect came from the children. For years, many had watched from the sidelines, frustrated by their father's decisions, resentful of the way he had alienated them, and unwilling to re-enter the chaos of family drama. News of Kody's financial downfall struck them in different ways. Some felt vindicated. Some felt sad. Some felt nothing at all. But almost none felt surprised. "This was coming," one of the older kids told a sibling over the phone. "He burned bridges, he burned money, he burned trust. At some point, the fire was going to reach him too." Yet even amid all the swirling bitterness, some of the